Today's episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott. Now, Joe is not only a fantastic guitar player, he draws on his years of experience as the ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and also at the McNally Smith Music College. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
You're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player. Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I speak to leading guitarists and guitar figures. And also we have the Iconic Albums series. And for that I'm joined by my friends Rob Rhodes.
Hey Matt, hey Gabor.
And Gabor Josika.
Hey Matt, hey Rob.
Great to see you guys. And this show's been running, I don't know, since about June, July 2021. And we review some of the favourite albums in our collections. And it's been such a fun series to do. And we're still going. Now, today's episode's a little different. We're not talking about a particular album, but we're talking about our favourite Beatles guitar moments. In fact, the year 2021's been pretty bad, but two fantastic things that have happened. Number one, the Iconic Album series.
Oh, yeah.
And
Top shelf.
Top shelf. And number two, a nice fresh dose of Beatlemania, which I think was due for everyone all around the world. So a couple of things really spearheaded that. There was the 3-2-1 McCartney special on Netflix with Rick Rubin and Paul McCartney, which was just a beautiful
Amazing.
show.
Amazing.
It was great, yeah.
And Peter Jackson's much lauded Get Back series has relatively recently dropped on Disney or Hulu or whatever you're watching
Disney Plus,
through.
yeah.
Disney Plus.
So, yeah, a lot of people really excited about the Beatles again for good reason. Now, a couple of months ago, I was floating the idea of doing a Beatles album for Iconic Albums. And I foolishly went to Facebook and I said, what's the best Beatles guitar album? And just people were just shouting at me on their keyboards saying...
Turn your caps off, people.
Yeah. Pretty much the consensus was, well, all of them.
Yeah.
And I had to say, yeah, you're right. Okay. So
Come
maybe...
on, Matt, didn't you know that? That's, yeah.
Maybe we should do a world record attempt for the longest podcast about the Beatles. And then we can talk about all of them.
Yeah, totally. We could just do
Alrighty.
each album. That could be.
How long does it have to be? I don't know. Probably only 17 hours or something. We can do it.
I've got my incontinence pants on. Let's go.
That's from you. You've got them left over from your years of training as an astronaut.
Yeah.
In the Austrian space station.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do for today's episode, we've got the top 12 Beatles guitar moments as adjudicated by ourselves. We've made these up ourselves. Researching our own hearts, really. Our own hearts and heads and minds.
Disclaimer, these aren't in order. Disclaimer, these are not in order. Are they? Did you put them in? If they are in order, Matt put them in order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Send your hate mail to Matt Wakeling, care of the Guitar Speak podcast. For the first time ever, I can say that.
My 4 are the top 4, and just the rest of them, just work it out. All right, we're going to jump straight in. We've got 12 moments we want to talk about. First one is A Hard Day's Night. Two parts of that song. First of all, the opening chord, which is remarkable. And second of all, George Harrison's double speed solo. So let's talk about that opening chord first. It's such a fantastic introduction. It's the start of the album, of course. The third studio album from the Beatles came out in 1963. But it was also the opening of the film by the same name, which was released in 1964. And George Martin, I'm paraphrasing, but he said he wanted a really... striking introduction for both the film and the album, and they came up with this chord.
I think they did well.
I think they succeeded.
Yeah. Can I just very quickly just because with the Beatles, and I mean, especially you saying, this is the feature film 1963 came out in 1964. I mean, the thing that I think a lot of people maybe don't realize, because talking to my wife and all this about doing this podcast. I mean, the Beatles were together for 7 years. I mean,
Insane.
They released 13 albums in 7 years. The first being in 1963. And by 64, they were the biggest band in the world. I mean, just the insanity of that.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
And they were like 20, 21 when that happened. And when the band broke up in 1970, they were all under 30. I mean, that's just absolute mind blowness of that. I just wanted to throw that in there because, I mean, just that is insane what they achieved in a few years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As guys in their 20s, I mean... Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to throw that in there because...
not at all. I mean, that whole thing, the biggest band in the world and the biggest band ever by 1964, it's not a great marketing campaign. From the day dot, those records were killer and miles ahead, arguably. I mean, it's music we're talking about. It's not a running race.
Yeah, of course.
You can't. How do you measure it? But really,
I mean, you measure it by sales, and I mean, and you measure it by how many people
and
fans, how many people are influenced. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like you're saying, it's not just the music, the albums they record and the songs. It's how they were recorded. I mean, they changed not just music in terms of what music is, but how music is recorded and how studio's been used forever, more than anyone else. So I mean, anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there. That's just a mind blowing kind of thing.
Yes,
what they achieved in a handful of years. Anyway, back to Hard Day's Night intro.
No, that's cool. That's awesome, and absolutely. Well, the opening chord, like we said, super effective. There's a lot of talk about how did it happen, what's in there. There's obviously some guitars. There's the bass. There's also some piano, which is sort of hard to hear, but it's in there. I've read that there are some drums in there, but I don't know if I can hear them. But there's a lot of stuff going on. Have you guys ever played this song on a gig?
No.
I've done it in some cover bands, and it's in the key of G, and I always did like a D7 sus4 or something. I knew it wasn't the chord, but I didn't know what else to do, and it was sort of part of it. But this is what I've found out, and again, this could be questioned, but George Harrison has said he played an F add 9 chord, so like a F chord with a G on top.
Yeah.
So he played that. John Lennon played reportedly a D sus4 chord, and Paul played a D note on the bass on the 3rd string, 5th fret, or 2nd string open, however you want to play it. So you could work out a name for that. There's a really great video actually by Randy Bachman from Bachman Turner Overdrive, where he does this live. And he explains that he goes, okay, I'm going to play the F add 9, and he gets his other guitarist to do something else. He gets the bass player to play the D, and he counts them in, and they do it. And it's pretty much the chord. It's spine tingling to hear it produced live. So I don't know, maybe after the show, the three of us can do that as well. That could be fun after party. But it's just astounding, sonically and harmonically, and
and I wonder, was John detuning at that point? Because, he used to detune a little bit, so his grandma knew who it was when it was him playing in the songs. So there's probably that little, discordant, detuned thing to it too that gives it that character.
Could be.
Because, he was doing that pretty early on, I think.
Yeah, wow. So, it's there's mysterious aspects of the chord, and there's stuff I guess people have worked out. But whatever, it's just super cool, super cool. The guitar solo is George on a 12-string electric, and it's double speed. It was recorded at half speed and then sped up.
Oh, Instagram people wouldn't like that nowadays. That's
well, it's funny what we think is fast and what we don't think is fast in guitar playing. Like these days, you can YouTube a 10-year-old playing Eruption easily. You could find people doing crazy stuff like that. But at the time, the solo was perhaps considered humanly impossible, but he had a vision for what he wanted to sound like and made it happen.
But in that Rick Rubin special, Paul goes, to John's credit, he used to play that like live.
Yeah, right.
He didn't have the chance to play at half speed. He said he'd watch him like playing that whole song all the way through.
Yeah.
And then do the solo going, oh my God, there's so much, what a trooper.
Absolutely. There is a BBC live recording of that, and they actually drop in the recorded version of the solo, and then they go back into the song live. It's really weird.
Oh,
wow.
okay.
It's bizarro. It's on one of those BBC live at the BBC, but obviously they had all the technology of the BBC at their hand there. So, like as you're saying, Rob, he would have had to pull it off live otherwise. So.
Yeah,
but
I might try it out. I might try it out on my new double neck.
Yeah, man. Today's show is brought to you by Rob's new double neck.
Yeah.
All right, that's the first moment. I'm going to hand over to Rob now. Octopus's Garden, man. Tell us about that.
Oh, like there's a couple of songs that if you're having a bad day or you want to lift and you want to start the day right, you put it on.
Yeah,
For me, one of them is September by Earth, Wind and Fire.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And the other one is this, Octopus's Garden. You cannot help but just thinking about it now, I'm smiling from ear to ear. It's just the most beautiful song. Ringo sings it, and it's just in pure Ringo fashion. Was written with the aid or assistance of George Harrison. I actually think on the Get Back thing, you can see where they're starting to put it together. They were putting it back, they were going through it then. Because, for all that happened on Get Back and it looked like the Beatles were going to break up, 3 months later they went in and recorded Abbey Road.
Yeah.
So,
Go figure.
My God, it's like we're out of...
I mean, they worked so hard. I mean, they worked a lot.
Yeah, it's astounding. So I just want to say the intro is obviously the iconic guitar moment.
Yeah.
It's that major guitar lead rhythm thing. It's very country-esque. And then the solo is great too. And actually the rhythm track underneath, how it builds with the solo is just pure songwriting, like magic. It's a unicorn. This song is a unicorn. I'm calling it now. But yeah, the basic instrumental track was recorded on the 26th of April, 1969, with the Beatles lineup, 2 electric guitars, Harrison and Lennon. McCartney was on bass and Ringo on drums. The backing vocals by McCartney and Harrison during the solo were put through compressors and limiters to create the gurgling sound. And at Starr's request, Harrison added the sound of bubbles blowing through a straw into a glass of milk.
As you do.
So, look, it's got sound effects, it's got Ringo, it's got great guitar, and it's got a milkshake. Like, it's the perfect pop song. It's just beautiful. And I'll fight anyone to the death who thinks otherwise.
And I mean, if you get anything out of watching Get Back, it's that they were goofing around so much in the studio.
Yeah. Oh.
And I mean, that's where blowing through a straw into a glass of milk, where that comes from. What song was it on Get Back where they were singing without opening their mouth? They had to, and they were looking at each other, and they sang the whole song with their teeth together. Stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. It's funny.
And we're going to get into things like that where they did 16 takes of a song over 7 hours, and you know how much they fooled around in between.
Oh yeah.
And but yeah, that is my number one like Beatles song.
Nice.
To just give you a pick me up at any time, no matter what you're going through. Just
Absolutely.
Put it on, play it. Love it.
All right, Gabor, I'm Only Sleeping.
Okay, so I'm Only Sleeping, off Revolver, 1966.
Yeah.
Now, again, only 3 years really after they formed. And if you listen to the difference in, what Revolver sounds like and what, the early record sounds like, it's completely different. And I mean, Revolver, considered one of the most influential albums of all times. And it inspired, so many other genres of music. Now, I'm Only Sleeping, and actually one of the other songs I picked as well, they sort of work hand in hand, but I picked I'm Only Sleeping because it's the first ever time that a backwards guitar was on a pop recording that was released.
Oh, really? Wow.
And the only reason it was this song, because actually the other song I picked was the one that was recorded first, but the only reason this was out first is because due to the American record label, which was Capitol, they released albums differently to the UK because certain songs they didn't want and certain, I don't know. Anyway, there was this, the whole first, 6 or 7 albums, they did different tracks on the albums. And about 2 months before Revolver came out, in the US, an album came out called Yesterday and Today, which is an album that only came out in the US, which featured a whole bunch of songs that weren't on other US versions of albums prior to Revolver. And it also featured two, if you know what I mean. And it features 2 songs that were on Revolver, which is coming out 2 months later in the UK. And this was one of them. And it was a single, it released as a single, and it was the first time people heard a backwards guitar solo or backwards guitar part in a song, even though it was actually the second song that was recorded with a backwards guitar part. The other song being the one coming up cool. that I'm going to be talking about later on. But basically, where was I? Yeah, so it's credited as a Lennon-McCartney song, but it was primarily a John Lennon song. The backwards guitar part was played by George Harrison and was meticulously planned out by George Harrison. And there's a quote somewhere saying where he spent 5 or 6 hours doing take after take after take, trying to meticulously work out while they were playing the tape of the main part backwards. He was trying to play the song forward and working out exactly when to do the changes. So it was really meticulously worked out. So it took a 5-hour late night recording session for George Harrison to record the 2 reverse guitars for the solos. So he recorded 2 parts. One was a fuzz guitar and one was a clean guitar. So the tape of the main track was running backwards so that when he reversed it, it was fit the dreamlike mood. And also, another little fun fact for Revolver, there was the first album the Beatles ever recorded where they used headphones to do overdubs. And apparently that was something that was not done prior to that.
Really?
And one of the reasons they used headphones is because of the backward stuff, because otherwise the bleed wouldn't have worked. And then it became a studio thing in future after that. But it was the first time ever the Beatles used headphones. And I think all the engineers and George Martin, when they were mixing it and producing it, they said, "Oh, this is so much better without all the bleed. Let's do this from now on."
Let's do it. That's great. That is awesome. All right. Yeah. Moving along. My next choice was Something, the George Harrison song from Abbey Road in '69, the final album. And again, two moments in here I want to highlight. The first is McCartney's super melodic bass lines. I mean, so influential on so many bass players. That style that he brought into those tunes. And if you listen to his lines, especially in between the vocals, like he really picked his moments. He wasn't just shredding over the whole ballad. He was picking his spots and doing it so beautifully in those verses especially. So super cool. And that tone he had from the...
Oh.
Sorry, just bumped some gear. And that tone he pulled from, that really woody open sort of tone he pulled from, I'm pretty sure it must have been the Hofner bass on that track.
Yeah, it would have, yeah.
I think, unless I'm wrong, but this beautiful tone. And then, of course, there's George's guitar solo, which reportedly, again, similar to the last tune you were speaking of, Gabor, apparently Harrison spent a lot of time on the solo Wanted to get it just so, and I think it's one of the most beautiful guitar solos you could hope to hear. It's the phrasing and the tone are just wonderful. I had a friend describe it as a vulnerable sounding guitar solo in some ways, which I thought was an interesting.
The whole song, I think it's just. I think it's one of their best songs. If there is such a thing. I mean, again, send hate mail. But I think it is up there as, I reckon, one of their best songs.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
It's actually and George Harrison, like struggling to get his material on the records.
Yeah,
what a tune!
I think he had to work hard for it. I think.
Yeah, I think it's the most covered Beatles song of all time as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Like by other artists.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I got to play it once at a wedding gig. You guys know what it's like on a wedding gig. You might get a request for the waltz or the bridal waltz or the father and the bride,
which is never a waltz.
Never a waltz.
No, and neither was this. It's in 4, but this was the bridal waltz, and I was so happy to learn this song and do the solo. Do you know what? Whenever I play a Beatles song on a gig. And it's got a solo, and I try and nail it as best I can. At the end of the solo, I just think, George, you are the man. You're the guy. Like,
I think very underrated, very very underrated guy. Even within the Beatles, very underrated guy. You know.
Yes. Yeah.
And beautiful player. Just the stuff. His song. I think his songs. It's so nice to you have the Lennon-McCartney powerhouse of, arguably one of the greatest songwriting duos of all times. But then you have Harrison coming through with these songs, which are quite different, but I think just really beautiful songs. He became, by the end of the Beatles, a great songwriter and great player.
Yeah, the Leslie sound on something is amazing. His phrasing, the lyrics, we're supposed to be talking about great guitar moments, but they're just great song moments. And the little motif, the melody at the beginning, it's just perfect, It's, it's like when you get George in the Beatles, it's the best of him, there's no filler with George. And similar with the Ringo stuff, you get the comedy and you get, the happiness side of him. You get his personality, but this is George's personality, and it's a wonderful song.
And I loved again in Get Back. I mean, you could see the beginnings of that song in Get Back, and I loved and he was like, "Oh, John, I'm stuck with the words there. Well, just say pomegranate." Something in a way she moves. Like no other. What could I say there? Oh, pomegranate. I just loved the way it was fantastic. But seeing that sort of the beginnings of that song during Get Back was great.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah. It's almost like sacred with a lowercase s, but sacred space, a special space that we wouldn't usually see. It's like when they do I guess with the McCartney 3-2-1 or any of those classic albums when they pull back all the faders or they solo just one part in a song that you've loved all your life. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's pretty special, yeah.
And you can hear it. Oh, I just wanted to add that the way they're mixed, it's so different when you listen to them in mono. You can hear everything in mono because it's mixed and EQ'd perfectly for everything to sit there. When it spreads to stereo, you lose some stuff. So then when you come back and listen to them in mono, you go, oh, there it is. Like it's all there. So it's a good little project for someone if they want to pick apart the Beatles, go to the stereo and the mono mixes. It's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we jump out and come back in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ba-ba-da-beep. Don't want to
places
leave
again.
me now. Now you two guys have flipped in my screen.
Yeah, you guys.
No, I
have to too.
believe in how.
I don't mind it. It keeps it fresh. Keeps it interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Robin Gabor. Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right, Rob. Helter Skelter. Not dissimilar.
Well, if this is the exact polar opposite of Octopus's Garden. This is from, and there's going to be a bit of a theme here because this is our 68's White Album, and it was written by Paul McCartney primarily, but credited obviously Lennon-McCartney, which is a theme through all of this. They just shared everything.
Yeah.
McCartney was inspired to write Helter Skelter after reading an interview with Pete Townsend of The Who, where he described their September 67 single, I Can See for Miles, as the loudest, rawest, dirtiest song The Who had ever recorded. So Paul McCartney just basically went, here, hold my beer, and wrote Helter Skelter. It obviously features Paul on lead vocal, and it's a great rock vocal. Backing vocal, and he plays lead and rhythm guitar on this.
And you've got Ringo at the end on lead vocals that, I got blisters on my thing.
Yeah, because apparently there were a lot of takes of this song as well.
Yeah.
So Lennon's just doing backing vocals, 6-string bass on this, and some sound effects through a tenor saxophone mouthpiece.
As you do.
And he also plays the piano on this. Harrison's backing vocals, lead and rhythm guitar and slide guitar. Ringo drums and that vocal shout that Gabor just alluded to. And Mal Evans is on trumpet. This has a real like dissonant, angry, discordant, however many like little ways I can describe how kind of off kilter this is to the Beatles. It's quite a simple song. And it's a great little descending, riff, the A and then down to E. I am not the theory guy here, as people listening will probably have gotten. So I'm just going to leave that to those guys. But I have played and loved singing this song. It's a great song. It's got a good little solo in there. And I don't know. I love the attitude of this song. The screaming, it's rock and roll at its best, at its finest. How about you guys? Got any thoughts on this one?
Amen to everything you've said. Only that I've heard this song described as proto metal, which it kind of is.
Yeah, and it was twisted by a certain like psychopath that we won't name, and adopted as his sort of theme song. But some cover versions of note. So Aerosmith covered this song, many Beatles songs. They did a cover of Come Together as well, a good cover of that. But I want people to go out and listen to a version that Bon Jovi did.
Bon Jovi did it. I was just about to say.
Live in Times Square for the These Days
MTV,
promo tour. Yeah.
For MTV Music Awards. They did a fantastic
so
version.
Good. And they don't play the whole song. It leads into Something for the Pain, where Richie plays, funny enough, an electric sitar, which is it's almost the perfect kind of meshing of the two songs. But yeah, there's some great covers of this song, but really, this is the quintessential version. It's just, I think I can't say any more than I've already said.
Did you fish any information on what they were using or gear to get that distorted sound? Because it's quite a angry distorted sound.
Yeah, I didn't really go deep diving too big on the gear, because there's so much stuff on the Beatles gear out there that people can, explain and talk about better than I can. But obviously there was tone benders and Vox amps and all that sort of stuff. And we know that Epiphones at that time were everywhere in the studio. So I can imagine that's what they were using.
And overdriving the tube mic preamps as well to get extra saturation and distortion. I think might be talking about that later on in one of the other songs as well.
Yeah, and I think we're also
same.
going to talk about in that song how they cut the speakers to get distortion as well, which was a trick that the Kinks used as well. But that's Helter Skelter.
Yeah, awesome, man. This episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott, ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and the McNally Smith College of Music. I was one of the beta testers for the course and can say as a music educator, I was really impressed by the logical sequence of learning. The course has also been endorsed by players such as Brett Garsed and Greg Koch. For more details, check out the links in our show notes. All right, Gabor, All My Loving.
Okay, so this is going the other direction again. So this was off with the Beatles, their second album, I think, in 1963, which was the second album they released in 1963.
Yeah.
I always had a thing for this song. I always liked this song. I love the bass line, the walking bass line. I love that sort of triplet feel guitar that John's doing. I love the Chad Atkins style. The Chad Atkins style solo. I just always had a thing for that. You know, it's just I don't have a huge amount on it. So it was again credited to Lennon McCartney, but mostly McCartney. This one, it was recorded on July 30, 1963, in 11 takes with 3 overdubs.
Wow.
But yeah. Really just, have any of you guys ever played that song live?
No.
To keep those triplets going all the way through, it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's really hard. Sorry, you were saying, Matt?
I've done it in an acoustic duo sort of setting, so I didn't have to do that part. We just kept it sort of shuffling. But yeah, absolutely. John's part is just full on. But how awesome is it in the track? It's just
it makes us. It's just the way it all blends together. You know, the cool walking bass line, that triplet sort of guitar. Then George playing a much more straightforward thing over it, and then going into that almost country solo, which is a really cool solo as well, which kind of goes in a different direction to the rest of the song. Which is I just always had a thing for that song. It's just and he played a Gretsch 6112 Country Gentleman for that solo. So
perfect.
Very Chad Atkins.
That song too. It's early Beatles. It's very cheerful, but there's also just some very clever harmonic stuff going on as well. Like in the chorus, that the major minor chord, all that stuff, Beato, and there's the sweetness.
There's
the sweetness, but there's the twists and turns which get you right in the feels.
And I love how then in the second chorus, it's actually George comes in singing harmony. I don't think John sings much at all in that song. I think George comes in singing the harmony in the second chorus, which wasn't in the first chorus. It's just interesting again the way they arranged it and the way they produced it.
Just very clever.
Yeah, very clever.
Beautiful.
Even for one of their more straight ahead songs, they're still
it is one of those, you know, grey suits with tie and, you know, bobbing the head thing from the early Beatles days. Yeah. But I don't know, it's just one of those songs. I always loved the sound of the guitars and I loved the way it sounded and the whole song how it came together.
Yeah.
Great selection.
All right. My next song is Blackbird, the McCartney tune. It's from the White Album. Sublime, amazing. So
if you wouldn't have picked it, I would have picked that.
Yeah,
that's would have been one I would definitely picked. Yeah,
man, it's the guitar part is relatively simple to play. If you're an intermediate guitarist, you can play it, but you got to be a genius to come up with it. I reckon just the way the voicings are used and a lot of the chords are happening on 2 strings with it's in the key of G, so the G string's ringing out, but a lot of the harmony's happening on the 5th and 2nd string, or the 6th and 2nd. So, I mean, you can look up a tab anywhere for it, but it's just very clever and Beautiful song. And again, some nice harmonic twists and turns, which for me makes the Beatles songs very, very special. So Blackbird, I think McCartney.
Sorry, no,
I think McCartney played the guitar part for that.
Yeah, he did.
Play and sang, yeah.
And tapped his foot.
And tapped his foot. How good's the foot tap in that?
Foot tap makes it.
It's really cool.
It's just such a sparse song, but it's just so beautiful, and it's a song to this day because I teach guitar. If someone who is not at a super beginner level, but sort of next level up, wants to get into finger style playing, finger picking. Yeah. That's one of the first songs I usually go for, and it's amazing how many younger kids kind of go, "Oh, that's really cool," and
they love it,
kind
don't
of gets
they?
them into the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
It's a gateway drug.
It is the gateway drug song.
All right, Rob. This could be the biggest guitar moment. I don't know. It says the word guitar in it anyway. While my guitar gently weeps.
All right, so this is another one from the White Album. It's getting plenty of representation. 68 double album. This one was written by George Harrison.
Yeah.
And it was an exercise in randomness inspired by the Chinese I Ching. Is that how you say it? Anyway,
okay.
I'm not as good at that as Gabor is of German names.
Rammstein.
There you go. and all the band members too, mind you. And his French is pretty good. His pronunciation of French is pretty good too.
Gérard Depardieu.
Yo play. It's French for yogurt.
Croissant. You just got to watch Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah, that's so good. So the song conveys his dismay at the world's unrealized potential for universal love. So George double-tracked vocals, the backing vocal, acoustic guitar, and the Hammond organ. John's on electric guitar, the tremolo that you hear in the track. Paul's on the harmony vocal, piano, and bass. Ringo Starr on drums and tambourine. And, of course, on lead guitar, Eric Clapton. So Eric and George were friends. It was the lead guitar part was played on that famed Les Paul named Lucy, which
you can see in the
was a gift.
Get Back video.
It was a gift from Clapton to Harrison, and it was used a lot on those sessions. But at first Eric was like, he didn't want to come in and do it. He's like, no one plays on Beatles records. It's just you guys. But George convinced him to do it. And he really wanted Clapton there because it seemed to lift everybody else's performance as well. So apart from that, Clapton, you can hear the vari speed that they used quite a lot because Eric he wanted it to sound more Beatle-y. He's like, I don't want it to sound like me. I want it to fit with the band. They used the ADT circuit with vari speed. With Chris Thomas manipulating the oscillator to achieve that wobbly effect. It's again George at his melancholic best. It's beautiful song. The key change, transient to the, what would you call it? Pre-chorus. It's not really a chorus. Bridge section.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. He gets into that falsetto part of his voice. Sounds amazing. Again, there's some killer cover versions of this song out there that I'm sure we've all heard.
Prince, come on, that's just
another callback to the Jeff Healey band. They do a great cover, and I can't speak highly enough of that cover. It's great. Toto do a wonderful cover of it. A local guy. So Peter Northcote. Shout out to Peter Northcote. Who check out his Twitch channel.
Definitely.
You can request him play
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. He streams via Twitch 3 times a week, and you can request him play it. And he plays that. he does it the only way Pete can do it, and that's a great version.
Kills it.
But I would be remiss to mention what Gabor just alluded to, the Hall of Fame performance, which included Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, Steve Winwood, Dhani Harrison, Steve's son, Steve Ferroni on drums. And that version has been immortalized now by Prince's solo.
Yeah.
And all the mystery around that, where the guitar goes when he throws it in the air.
After he threw it in the air.
But there is an angle where you see where it goes, and it kind of, when you do see that angle, it kind of destroys it. I wish I didn't see it. Don't go looking for that angle. But all of that aside, the Beatles version stands well and truly on its own. I won't say head and shoulders above, because there are some great versions of it out there, but the original is the best. And it's one of the first times the Beatles invited someone else into the studio other than, George Martin and string players and horn players, but someone to play a lead part. And it's a real kind of exclamation point on the White Album for me. And for most guitar players, it's a great exercise in chord changes and structure, harmony and melody. It's a beautiful song.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, amazing. Hey, that Prince version, just going back to it, one thing I love about that is, you got Petty and Lynn, and Dhani Harrison is just loving it. So they're just blown away by Prince. And these are guys that have been around, they've seen everything, and they're just digging Prince's solo so much. Every time he takes another chorus of it. It's amazing.
It's just amazing how he completely took control of that stage, and he was just Prince. There's another guy we could do a podcast like this, like the Beatles. There's another guy who's just, talk about someone on a different level to the rest of the world. But just how he just took control, and then just the coolest way ever to end. Just chuck the guitar in the air and walk off. Just everything about it is just awesome. That's just but I'm a massive Prince fan too.
Yeah, me too. And there's some behind the scenes interviews with Tom Petty, how he was talking about, and they weren't sure, because he was like, "Oh, you just play it," and they rehearsed. They didn't really rehearse it, and Prince wasn't there in rehearsal or something. And I was like, "Oh, it's okay. And they were really doubtful about what it was going to be. So. Again, like we were talking previously about on the iconic live albums episode, where it might get loud, where The Edge and Jack White are just smiling ear to ear at Jimmy Page, showing how he played Whole Lot of Love. That these guys are just, they're ear to ear, smile. They can't believe what's happening, and they're like little kids on stage, like giggling like Beato interviewing Sting or Tommy Emmanuel, just giggling like a child, and it's that pulls you into those moments, and that's what makes them so, air quotes, iconic.
Yeah, definitely,
absolutely,
What's next, Matt?
Next song, Gabor. You've got Taxman.
So you guys seem to be sort of hovering around the White Album. I seem to be hovering around Revolver a lot, unintentionally. But so Taxman, again, it's a George Harrison track, which there seem to be a few of them in this, which is quite a rarity really in the Beatles world. And I think Revolver was sort of one of the first times when there were some George Harrison tracks on. I don't think he's done. Was there much before?
I don't think so.
I think that was the first time there was George Harrison songs on the album. So the song basically, just a little bit of background information. The song was written about the UK tax system at the time, with new prime minister being elected, all this stuff happening, but in a landslide win apparently. But pretty much these tax systems where guys, in that sort of tax bracket, high income tax bracket, almost going bankrupt, because you earn so much money and you pay up to 90% tax on what you make. So it was basically, and there's all these little tongue-in-cheek comments, and he even mentions I didn't write down what the names were, and I can't remember, but he mentions the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition like by name in it,
Okay.
And it's that 1 for me, 13 for you, 1 for me, kind of thing, all that sort of stuff that's mentioned in it.
Because it really drove a lot of artists out of the UK, didn't it? So
yeah.
People started building studios in the West Indies or wherever, to get out.
Even a few years later, there's some stories which I've heard from relatively well-known Australian musicians when bands like Duran Duran came here because they fled the whole tax thing in the UK, and they recorded albums in Australia because they anyway it wasn't.
Taxation refugees.
Taxation refugees. So another thing with Taxman, it's recognised as one of the first songs written that sort of major artist release written about topical concerns, and a lot of people think that song and its sort of abrasive sneer, that's under quotation mark, like a quote, is considered a precursor to the punk movement later on, and it being sort of one of the songs that originated punk music, talking about political things, talking about issues in that respect.
Definitely,
and kind of almost being a bit punkish about it, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, famously, so George Harrison, as we've heard through other songs that he's spent a lot of time working out solos on, he apparently spent hours and hours and hours trying to work out the solo. It didn't go the right way. Paul McCartney seemed to kind of get in there a lot and kind of give suggestions and say, maybe you should try this, maybe you should try that. When it got to the point when Harrison just said, well, you just do it. Why don't you try it? And he did. He did. And sort of the solo on there is Paul McCartney playing the solo. And there's a quote saying, Harrison said he was happy to have the song recorded for Revolver and was not fussed about who played guitar in the solo. He added, I was pleased to have him play on that. If you notice, he even did a little Indian bit in it for me. So there's a little harmonic minor kind of sounding thing in it.
They kind of one string, the pull-offs and things, yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of one of the things. The thing I always liked about that song, and I think, again, there's some rumors that maybe it had something to do with that. It always reminded me of Batman, the
rhythm of it.
The rhythm of the da-da, in the middle of it. Batman. And it always reminds me of Batman. Yep. And apparently there's rumors that there was also, they were kind of thinking of it almost like the Taxman as like a superhero like Batman. And it was like, like the tax guy superhero or anti-superhero. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry?
Is it the Hendrix chord as well on that Taxman?
There's a Hendrix chord in there, yeah. That's when it's a major minor, that sharp 7 sharp 9 or whatever it is, that Hendrix chord. Yeah. That's that
so you got
that,
Batman plus the Hendrix chord,
Hendrix
what could
Batman.
Be better than that?
Exactly.
And Paul going nuts. That solo, back to the solo, Paul goes wild on that too, because we know he loved Hendrix and he loved the energy. So it was cool what he brought to that solo.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's a very different solo to anything else Beatles recorded, I think.
Yep. Great tune, man. Awesome. Hey, we're down to our final three Beatles guitar iconic moments. Batman. Okay. Revolution.
No.
I'm talking about a revolution. Now, the song Revolution, great tune. What I want to talk about is the fuzz tone that was pulled on this. Not Revolution number 9, but Revolution, which was played, the guitar part, I believe, was played by John. And how did he get that great fuzz tone? He just plugged straight into the board, cranked it like crazy. Bam. There's your tone. Now, Gabor, people can't see, but you've got 700 pedals sitting behind you. And of course, co-host of the Super Fun, Awesome, Happy Time pedal show. 2021, like fuzz, surely we're at peak fuzz appreciation in terms of what fuzz pedals have been doing on the last couple of years. Are there any pedals that kind of try and mimic that vibe?
Yeah. There's actually there's a bunch of them. I think one of the first one was the Hudson Electronics Broadcast, and actually also JHS did one.
Color box.
The color box, which is like a Neve console kind of thing in a box. But yeah, there's a couple of them now that came out. Actually, even another friend of the show. Did you talk to Andrew McDonald, didn't you? Mostronics, Andrew? Yeah, you talked to him, didn't you?
Yes.
Moz, yeah.
Yep, friend of the show.
He just did one that's kind of a little bit along that line as well. It's a different sort of sound, but it's a cool sound, that going direct. And I think we talked about it actually a little bit on the St. Vincent episode as well, because she did that for that album bit.
Yes, because she was a fan of those direct.
Plugging
direct
straight into the console, and I think with that, because there were tube mic preamps, a lot of them as well. And when you crank them, you get that sort of tube saturation on top of it as well. So and it's a cool sound.
Another Prince mention too, because he used to record direct in a console for a lot of stuff too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Actually, a lot of people did it. Surprisingly, lots of people kind of did it, going straight into the console.
Yeah. Great Prince quote. I know we're talking about Prince a lot in the Beatles episode, but there was some quote. They said, like, "Are you trying to compress it or limit it, or what are you doing when you plug straight in?" He goes, "Man, I just want to electrify it."
Yeah.
Full stop.
He was the coolest dude ever, Prince.
Yeah. But Revolution Fuzz, great intro by John. Like, John, maybe, an underrated guitar player in his own right as well. There's been some cool John moments in this episode.
And I think also, again, going back to Get Back, because, I mean, that sort of, I guess, semi-sparked this episode, didn't it? But he did a lot more stuff that I never thought he did. A lot of the stuff that I always thought George did, but he actually did a lot of it.
That's all him doing all those little things, the solo.
Yeah. He played a lot more than I ever thought. I thought of him more just as more the singer who plays, acoustic guitar or electric guitar, But he actually did a lot. He did quite a bit.
I guess that's one of the great things about the Beatles, isn't it? They would share vocal duties or different instruments or different.
They were all quite capable on the piano. They were all quite capable on the bass six.
I think for the two things that I took out of the Get Back, the two major things I took out of the Get Back documentary was how amazing Ringo was as a team member. Yeah. He just sat there.
Yawning.
Doing his thing. And when he needed to play, he played. When he didn't, he just took it all in. And then he was, coming up with things in his mind as well. What would be right for the song? And he'd try different things, but he was just patient because he knew what the end result was going to be. There was no ego. There was like, "You're not including me. I'm getting out of here. Call me when you've got something." He was part of the whole process. Even if he didn't put it in, his presence was absolutely part of the recipe.
And he wore the coolest clothes.
Oh, mate, he was fantastic. Yes. And then the other thing was that in the first part where they're in the big studio, Lennon was not into it. Like none of them really were. They weren't feeling the space, but Paul was trying to work, George was trying to work things out, and Ringo was just doing Ringo. But once things started to come together and they moved to the new spot and John engaged, it was like putting a bullet in a gun. They were there, and then once he was engaged in what was going on in the songs, whether they were his songs or not, everything just went forward at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and he didn't care if he was on bass on that song or piano on that song or whatever. He was just in the moment, and it was like, even though there were sparks happening, Paul was getting things going, but it really all came together when they were all present, and John was engaged because he was not interested those first couple of weeks at all.
No.
But you just saw it change, and just being able to see that evolution is amazing. Like, I don't know. I didn't count how many times I cried through that, but it was multiple.
And the other thing, actually, talking about Get Back, the other thing I got out of it is that Yoko Ono was not in any way, shape, or form involved in anything. She just sat there.
Yeah.
There was a lot more made out of it than what it actually was. She was just sitting there quietly. I mean, it's a bit odd that she was sitting there the whole time. That was a bit odd, but she didn't say anything. She didn't tell John to do stuff or not to do stuff.
And there's a Yoko Ono documentary, apparently. I haven't seen it yet, but it addresses all of that stuff, and it shows that she was actually the one trying to keep John in the Beatles. She was trying to keep them together through all of that. Yeah. And she just sat there. She did her knitting. She did her art, whatever.
It's funny to watch.
And the other thing is how, like, beautiful a spirit Linda McCartney was as well. Like, she was amazing foil for them too, and just gave them a break. And her daughter coming in, and just they all had fun. It wasn't this serious. There was no budget. Let's put it this way.
Oh, man.
They could hang around if they wanted to.
It was awesome.
That in those days, to film that much video footage and to do that much audio footage, holy moly, that's an expensive undertaking. But anyway,
amazing. If you haven't seen it, folks, go and see it. Go and watch it. If you've seen it once, really, go and watch it again. You'll never stop learning.
All right, Rob, next song. I feel like I can't pronounce this properly. It's not going to sound right unless you have it in a Liverpudlian accent, but it's Your Blues.
Your Blues, like as in your. So this is from, again, the White Album. On vinyl, I've got Revolver, I've got Abbey Road, I've got the Blue Hits. And maybe after Christmas I'll have another one. But the White Album I grew up with. Like, my parents had every vinyl record, but for some reason I always pulled the White Album out for all of the reasons we've gone through already. This one, again, was credited Lennon-McCartney, but it was written and composed by Lennon during the Beatles retreat in India. And the song is a parody of blues music, specifically the English imitators of the blues. So they were recording and things were happening or not happening in Abbey Road. And someone made a joke that they would end up in basically what was a tiny little room, 4x8, that had one of the 8 tracks in it. And these things were huge. So apparently they all jammed in this tiny little room that if anyone moved, they would have been hit by a guitar neck or something. They faced the amps to the walls in this tiny room, and they jammed together from 7 p.m. till 5 a.m. And after 14 takes, this is the track. They glued a couple of tracks together. Take 5, there was a lot of Take 5 in there. Not the band Take 5. They were not born. Anyway.
And not that Take 5 either.
No, not that Take 5. So there are 3 guitar solos performed in the song. The first one being John, and he's performing that repetitive syncopated guitar pattern. Simultaneously to an interesting little blues solo from George. The second solo is a screeching solo from George with subtle single note guitar solo from John heard in the background. And the third solo is both guitarists, so both George and John playing lead solos. And they're adding the artificial double tape tracking, that warbling effect to things too. It's just you can hear, I think, I didn't note it down, but I think at 3 minutes 16, you can hear where the takes are spliced together in this song. But it's just a dirty blues. It's kind of like a fun intro riff. But, it's a great little ascending descending pattern into like a slow blues. And there's just moments in this song, like vocally, it's beautiful. It's just a great dirty blues song with John Lennon's tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. As he often did. And again, cool that the three of them all took solos.
Yeah.
Got to stretch out a little.
It's killer. I realized that I just the intro riff that I just hummed was Dig a Pony. So yeah. It is midnight, folks. We're recording this just for just for reference. So
it's only 11 where I am.
All right. Well, it's probably apt then that Gabor, you finish with our final moment of iconic Beatles guitar moments with Tomorrow Never Knows.
Tomorrow Never Knows. So
because we're in tomorrow and you're not.
And I never know. So again, Revolver, 1966. So this, again, credited as a Lennon-McCartney song, but mostly John Lennon, this one. So this was actually... Okay, so the Beatles started recording Revolver. They took, for the first time, really, since they started in 63. So this is 66. It's only 3 years into them being together. For the first time, they took some time off. They took 3 whole months off. So they've worked non-stop the whole first 3 years, basically. Took 3 months off at the start of 1966 after the tour for Rubber Soul, the prior album. And in Rubber Soul, they started really experimenting with the studio as part of an instrument. And they were kind of fed up with touring. They wanted to stop touring. They wanted to primarily focus on recording and utilizing the studio as an instrument. So this was the very first song in the very first session for the Revolver recordings that they did. So that's why before the other song, what was it called? I'm Only Sleeping, that I was talking about, which was the first song that had a reverse guitar part that was released. This is actually the first song that was ever recorded with that, and that led to the other song having a reverse guitar solo in it as well. Now there's tons of stuff in reverse. And the story goes, apparently, there is no, I couldn't find any exact reasoning, but apparently there's a story. So John Lennon recorded basically I think recorded at home, like a demo version of the song, and brought it in. And one of the engineers, tape operator engineers, threaded the tape backwards, accidentally. Okay. So the story goes. And it was played back, and it played that song backwards. And apparently something about the chord progression and what he was playing, they all went, this sounds really cool. So they started doing it on purpose then, right? So they started re-recording it and kind of experimenting with it all, which... the way the whole song is, it leads to basically a lot of historians and people saying this song led to electronic music sampling, basically. This was one of the first times sampling was kind of used. And psychedelic rock and even world music, because of all the stuff that was going on. So there is... sitar, backwards sitar, tambura, which is like that sort of Indian drone instrument going backwards. Some of Ringo Starr's cymbals go backwards. The whole main guitar part goes backwards. There's all this tape looping stuff. And then they overdub bits on separate tapes and then manually added them backwards and forwards and slowing stuff down. But they played basically tape recorders as an instrument into the main tape, which was sort of what people said. This is sort of probably the first instance of sampling to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Also, so the story goes that the song was written by John Lennon while taking LSD and reading the book, The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert, and Ralph Metzner. And it basically tells you in the book, apparently, to take LSD and follow certain steps. And apparently he was doing it, and that gave him the idea of the song. And it's about meditating and the world and your spirit being one with everything. And so that's kind of where all that came from. Now, also interestingly, the song title, Tomorrow Never Knows, none of those words ever appear within the song. And again, it was something, for some reason, Lennon, he in an interview, he said he remembered Ringo saying something in Ringo said something in an interview in early 1964. Ringo started uttered the phrase "Tomorrow never knows" when laughing off an incident that took place at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C., during which one of the guests had cut off a portion of his hair. And he uttered the words in a TV interview when they were talking about that, "Tomorrow never knows." And John remembered that for some reason and used that as the title for the song. So again, I mean, there were some drugs involved, kids, so don't do that kind of stuff. Drugs are bad, okay?
Yeah.
But,
Hugs, not drugs.
Sorry?
Hugs, not drugs.
Hugs, not drugs. Exactly.
No, hugs are bad today, man.
Oh, yeah.
You'll get Omicron.
No hugs, no drugs.
True.
No hugs, no drugs.
Socially distant.
Just shrugs.
Shrugs. Yes. Emoticons. Hug emoticons.
Yeah.
So originally the song was, while they were working on it, it was called Mark 1. And it was also known as The Void. That was the working titles. Oh. And then while they were doing the mixing later on, they were going to call it The Void up until the very last minute. But Lennon said it would have been a more suitable title, but it was concerned about its obvious drug use connections.
Well, he should have thought of that a lot earlier in the process, man.
He should have. Also, one thing I forgot. So they also put Lennon's voice through George Harrison's Leslie rig. That's part that happened there as well.
And what about the rumor that Alvin from the Chipmunks appears in the background that you can hear? Is that really him?
I heard it was Theodore.
Okay. It seems more a Theodore thing.
Yeah. Much more Theodore, less Alvin. But yeah, so I mean that's the reason sort of I picked it. It's the whole backwards reverse guitar thing. And again, I mean, Revolver as a whole is sort of considered as one of the most forward-thinking albums that inspired, punk music, inspired psychedelic music, inspired electronica, inspired progressive rock, inspired world music. I mean, it was, in its day, something no one has ever heard before. And again, 3 years after the band started, to go from "I Want to Hold Your Hand" to that in 3 years is...
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it was the first shot basically fired in the little friendly rivalry the Beatles had with the Beach Boys as far as production and ideas and that kind of thing went on.
Yeah.
It's I love this. I'm glad you picked this song because I would have had it in my list. And I'm glad we're talking about it, and none of those other songs missed out. But it's great. And there's some
the drums. The
drums
are great on this.
So good. And there's that YouTube video of Dave Grohl going like, "Who thinks of that?"
Yeah.
Because he's a songwriting drummer. He writes for the song. He's not just writing. They weren't worried about making people dance at this point. They were, they're breaking new ground, and it's great. And one of my favorite cover versions of this song is from the movie soundtrack for Sucker Punch. They do a really great cover of it. I'll have to, if you guys keep chatting, I'll find out who it's by. But it's a great version. But I think it's actually from the actress in the movie. That sings it, Emily Browning. But it's the production. It's almost a 1-for-1 with new technology. Like, it's just beautiful.
I got to check it out.
Well, a shout out to it, talking about technology and that whole idea of playing the studio as an instrument.
Yeah.
Like the Beatles owned it, and then, like you said, the Beach Boys jumped in, and that was a cool back and forth, those next couple of records from both bands. But there's an album I loved, and it's called Love, the Beatles' Love, and it's
I've got that.
It's like the mashup album, mainly put together by Giles Martin, George Martin's son, and it was really produced for Cirque du Soleil for their Beatles show.
Okay.
But Giles Martin, he had the keys to the kingdom. Essentially, he could draw from any of these tracks and put them together. I think, for example, the Taxman solo was put into Drive My Car, if I'm remembering correctly. Like just a few little things like that. But it's really, I don't know. It still kind of works. It sounds almost heretical to remix the Beatles, but they kept it in the family, and Paul and Ringo gave the thumbs up, as did Yoko, and
I think George was still alive then too.
Oh yeah, I think his wife was there for the final bits though. He might have heard the early ones. I've forgotten her name.
Mrs. Harrison.
Yeah, sorry, Mrs. Harrison. But yeah, it kind of got the blessing. So yeah, that's a cool record.
Yeah, the documentary for that is great too.
Yeah,
That Tomorrow Never Knows version is by Alison Mosshart and Carla Azar.
Ah, cool.
Okay, gotta check that out.
It's on the Sucker Punch, and that whole soundtrack is killer. It's got Skunk and Nancy on it, and Björk, Smashing Pumpkins. It's a great soundtrack. But
what song does Björk do?
Björk, she does Army of Me.
Okay, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, you'd actually really love that soundtrack. I love the movie too. I'm totally into those types of movies, and it's a bit of a trip, so it fits in with the Beatles perfectly.
Okay.
How many Beatles songs have been covered? Are they the most covered band ever?
Quite possibly, if you don't count classical music, I guess.
Yeah,
I know James Brown is the most sampled artist.
Okay,
but because a lot of hip hop stuff, samples, they sample a lot of James Brown stuff. But yeah, Beatles, I'd imagine it would be.
Imagine.
Hey, boom, boom.
All right, thanks for joining us for another Guitar Speak podcast, Iconic Albums. I've really enjoyed putting these conversations together with Rob and Gabor, and it's been a really cool addition to our podcast show, which every week has deep dive one-on-one interviews as well. That's been our bread and butter for the last 5 years, and that will be continuing as well. Thanks to Fretboard Biology for sponsoring today's episode. Check out the links in the show notes. All right, my name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. And in the words of Michael Schenker, German guitarist from UFO, the Scorpions, and MSG,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.